He's been fantastic. He really has. They didn't have anybody else who could step up and be a number one starter, not even close. And again, without him, I don't know that they make the playoffs this year.
Dan, thank you so much for your time. It's an exciting time for Blue Jays. They clinched postseason last night. What's your overall assessment of Toronto's Blue Jays 2020 season?
You know what, Daniel? It's good to be with you. I think they had a really good season. You know, you go back to the fact that they weren't given permission to play in Canada because of the government restrictions, and they had to find a home. They quarantined in Toronto for summer camp for 2.5 weeks, and they all became very close. And then they thought they might play in Pittsburgh, and they thought they might play in Baltimore, and eventually they play at their AAA ballpark in Buffalo. And that was a difficult situation for them, just the uncertainty of knowing where they were going to play. They had a lot of adversity, and I think it actually brought them closer. It made them a closer group and kind of gave them an us against the world mentality that they took into the season. And then they got off to a slow start, had some excruciating one-run losses and extra inning losses early in the season, and then the injuries hit. Bo Bichette went out, 3 of their starting pitchers, their closer in Ken Giles, and yet they started playing better and better. And they went on a stretch where they went 19-9 in a 28-game stretch, only to then have a 6-game losing streak and then to start playing better again and to make the playoffs. So I give them a lot of credit. They're not a great team. They've got flaws. They make mistakes, but they are very, very resilient. They don't give up. They keep fighting, and I think it's a real credit to them that they've made the playoffs.
Right. I mean, those of us that are in Korea, we follow Hyunjin and Dodgers for the last 7 seasons, and this is our first year really following the Toronto Blue Jays on a day-to-day basis. So we weren't quite too sure what to expect from the team, but what was your realistic expectation coming into the season?
I thought they had a chance to be a 500 team and maybe get the last playoff spot. I thought coming into the season that there were 6 teams that looked better than the others. The Rays and the Yankees, the Twins and the Indians, the A's and the Astros. I thought those 6 were kind of a lock to get the playoffs. I knew the White Sox were getting better. I didn't know they'd be this good this year.
Right.
I thought the Blue Jays were in a group with the White Sox, the Red Sox, who I thought would be okay, the Rangers, and the Angels. I thought 2 of those 5 teams would make the playoffs, and that if you played 500 ball, you had a chance. So I think the Blue Jays are about where I expected them to be, but that doesn't, again, take into consideration the adversity and the injuries. You know, again, 3 starting pitchers, their top 2 relievers, and then after Bo Bichette, it was Teoscar Hernandez was out for 10 days, Rowdy Tellez is still out. They had so many injuries that they could have crumbled. They really could have. So I think they're about where they're supposed to be, but they've had to overcome a lot to get there. So as you've watched, if you've been following the team, they're very, very young. The youngest group of position players in baseball. And that's exciting because they're going to get better. None of them, or very few of them, are even in their primes yet. So, again, I think it's a credit to them that they've made the playoffs, but overall, big picture, I think they were always going to be about in this situation, but they did enough to get it.
All of us are following the Blue Jays, I'll be honest with you, because of Hyunjin Ryu. He's the biggest star in Korea. And it's one thing to play for the Dodgers, their established team, their MVPs on that roster. And we were so curious to see how he would respond. What's your overall observation of Hyunjin's season?
He's been fantastic. They wouldn't be in the playoffs without him. You know, as you said, his first 2 starts weren't great. His command was off in his first one, and then his second one against Washington, his velocity was a little bit down. He wasn't all that sharp, and I thought the Nationals had a really good game plan against him. They kind of sat on his changeup and took it the other way and did a lot of damage against him. But he's made 10 starts since then, and 9 of them have been fantastic. The only one that wasn't was 3 or 4 starts ago against the Yankees when he gave up a couple of home runs in the first hit. The other 9 have been absolutely great. I think in those other 9 starts, he's only given up 6 or 7 runs total.
Right.
And I know last night on the air, I said that in his last 9 starts, he'd only walked 11 and he had struck out 59. So think about that. And then to do what he did last night, 7 shutout innings. You know, as you may know, no Blue Jay starter had gone into the 7th inning at all this year.
Right.
Ryu had a lot of really good 6-inning starts, but he'd always been up at about 95 or 100 pitches by the end of the 6th, so he never got into the 7th. But he was very efficient last night. And to do what he did against the New York Yankees, in a game where the Blue Jays could clinch, to go out and throw 7 scoreless innings was really remarkable. It's probably the best performance that any Blue Jay has given this year. You know, when the voting is tabulated, Teoscar Hernandez will get some MVP votes. Like, he's not going to win it. He'll finish 9th or 10th or 8th or something like that. I don't know that Hyun-Jin will get any MVP votes. But if you ask people around the Blue Jays who's the MVP, I think those two could share the award. I think Teoscar and Hyun-Jin Ryu could share the award. He's been fantastic. He really has. They didn't have anybody else who could step up and be a number 1 starter, not even close. And again, without him, I don't know that they make the playoffs this year.
You've been calling Major League games for a long time. You've seen Hall of Fame pitchers, Hall of Fame players, All-Stars, MVPs. But when you look at Hyun-Jin's starts, what sticks out to you? I mean, what makes him such a great pitcher?
His command is unbelievable. You know, he rarely makes mistakes over the middle of the plate. He can throw his fastball and his cutter in. His cutter, he can backdoor it. He can throw his changeup down and away. He can throw his curveball for a strike whenever he wants. So the first thing is command. And the second thing is what a great game plan he has. There's no pattern. You know, if you're a hitter, how do you know if you look for a cutter or a curveball or a changeup? He can throw any of his pitches in any count to both lefties and righties, and he can throw them for strikes. So if I were a young pitcher, that's exactly the kind of guy that I would watch to understand pitching. Like, you can go out there and watch a guy who throws 100 miles an hour, but you're not going to learn anything from him because you don't throw 100 miles an hour.
Right.
So if I were a young pitcher trying to get into professional baseball or Major League Baseball, Hyun-Jin Ryu is exactly the guy that I would watch. Look at how he sets up hitters. Look at how he changes his patterns. And more than anything, look at his command. And it's been a little challenging for Danny Jansen this year, sometimes with the signs, because Hyun-Jin throws so many different pitches. Danny's trying to think along with him. And I think that's been hard because Ryu has been around for so long. He knows exactly what he wants to do. And Jansen's just trying to keep up sometimes. But Danny's done a great job trying to figure it out. And I love watching Hyun-Jin Ryu pitch. I absolutely love it. Because again, it's one thing to just overpower guys like a Aroldis Chapman, and that's fun too. But the way that Hyun-Jin Ryu gets outs is really fun.
You may not agree with me on this, but I agree with what you've just said about his command and all about his pitch patterns and all that stuff. But I think he's one of the most boring pitcher on the planet because he doesn't strike guys out. He doesn't show any kind of emotion. When he's on, you just see a ton of ground balls and weak contact, no real action. Yeah. Do you agree with that? What I just said?
Well, I agree with the weak contact part. I love weak contact. I actually do. So I'm old, right? I come from an era where strikeouts weren't everything, where you wanted to get quick outs so you could get deeper into the game, where ground balls were good. And they're still good, but they're just not, strikeout good right now, analytically, I guess. So I kind of agree with what you say, but I don't find it boring at all. I love the way he sets up hitters. I love seeing the frustration on their faces when they do hit a weak ground ball. And we talked about the fact that his expression never changes on the mound. We talked about it last night on the air, actually. Very, very rarely. We've seen him be playful a couple of times. There was a game, I don't know where it was, but Rowdy Tellez had just hit a home run and he went back to the dugout, and Hyun-Jin was sitting behind the dugout because he wasn't pitching that game. And he got up to give Rowdy a high five, and Rowdy blew right by him, didn't even see him. And so then Hyun-Jin got on Rowdy's case, and Rowdy apologized, and the next time Rowdy came out, he gave him a high five. And we know that guy is in there. We know he's very, very popular with his teammates. And I know from being around the Dodgers so much for ESPN the last several years that he was very popular with his teammates there. And we've heard Ross Stripling talk about Hyun-Jin Ryu a lot since Stripling came to the Blue Jays. So there is personality in there. He just doesn't show it on the mound.
Right.
And I'm okay with that. If something's bothering him, he's not going to let you see it. And I think that's good.
Okay. As I was watching the last, the 7th inning, when Hyun-Jin was walking back to the dugout, I think he had about 100 pitches at that particular point. Unfortunate part of this whole thing is that he wasn't able to do this at Rogers Center. Yeah. Can you tell us if last night had been at Rogers Center as he was walking back into the dugout after 7 innings of shutout ball against the Yankees and in a game that Blue Jays were clinching the postseason berth? What would that have been like at Rogers Center?
It would have been insane. It's hard to describe how loud it would have been. If you go back and watch, this game right here, the Jose Bautista bat flip game,
right.
Watch the moment when he hits that home run and what the scene was like. That's what it would have been like. To clinch a playoff spot against the Yankees. Hyunjin is incredibly popular, and that will be seen more whenever fans get back into the ballpark. I think if every ballpark in the majors is at its loudest, I think the Rogers Center is the loudest ballpark in baseball.
Wow.
And it's not because of the acoustics of the building, it's the fans.
Right.
It's funny, Maple Leaf fans are quiet. Raptor fans and Blue Jay fans are very loud. The Blue Jays have a very young, very loud, very energetic, very diverse fan group. And that moment when Hyunjin Ryu walked off the mound would have been extraordinary. And if I were calling the game at Rogers Center, I wouldn't have said a word. He would have gotten the last out, and I just would have let him walk off. I wouldn't have said anything and just let the fans and the noise take over. There's a large Korean population in Toronto, as I'm sure you're aware, and that would have been a factor all season long. Not as big as Los Angeles, but it's big, and that would have been a factor all season long too. But it would have been extraordinarily loud at Rogers Center last night.
Whenever I talk about Hyunjin, fans here think that I am like over excited. But from your perspective, can you tell us how special of a season it was for Hyunjin in 2020 season?
I would hope he really enjoyed it. There were a couple of times where I said to myself, these aren't the Dodgers. He doesn't have great, as many great players around him as he did with the Dodgers. And I wonder sometimes if he was saying to himself, man, what did I do? But we can see he's having fun. We can see he's been a great teammate. And obviously we can see how well he's pitched. He's been terrific. ERA under 3, pitching for an American League East team. That is not an easy thing to do. I would hope that he's really enjoyed himself and that he's excited about the future. Because when you look at Guerrero and Bichette and Gurriel and Biggio and Tellez and Kirk and Teoscar, etc., there are so many good young players on this team that the Blue Jays should get better year after year. So it's been a good season for them. It's been a great season for Ryu, and hopefully it continues into October.